Let's learn English with poetry. This is Child on Top of a Greenhouse by Theodore Roethke.
Here's an overview of what we'll cover in this video. First, let's learn a little bit about the poet.
Theodore Roethke is an American modernist poet. He was born in 1908 in Michigan and died in 1963. His father was a German immigrant, a market gardener who owned a large local greenhouse. And probably for that reason, he often writes about childhood and the natural world. His style is accessible, fairly easy to read, and he often writes in free verse, which means poetry that does not rhyme. Now let's prepare a little bit before we read. This poem contains sensory details. These are details and descriptions in writing that use the 5 senses. They can include words that describe sight, touch, sound, taste, and smell. These details make the writing more engaging and vivid, meaning lifelike. For example, the crunch of papery brown leaves beneath my boots. This poem is in the style of realism. This is art or writing that represents reality by portraying mundane, everyday experiences as they are in real life. It focuses on familiar people, places, or situations. This poem also has an example of a simile. A simile is a comparison of one thing to another thing of a different kind, used to make a description of something more vivid. It often uses the word like to compare the two things. For example, my kids fight like cats and dogs. You might also see some new words in this poem. Billow is a verb meaning to swell or puff up in the wind. Breeches are old-fashioned, usually shorter pants or trousers. Crackle means to make small, sharp, repeated cracking noises. Splinters are small, thin, sharp pieces of wood, glass, etc., broken off from a larger piece. Putty is a soft substance, like clay, that is often used for holding glass in window frames or filling in holes in a wall. A chrysanthemum is a type of flower. Accuse means to say that someone has done something wrong. Streaked means marked with stripes or lines of discoloration. Rush means move with speed. An elm is a type of tree. Plunge means to jump or dive quickly and energetically. And finally, greenhouse is a glass building used to protect plants from cold weather. Now let's read the poem. Child on Top of a Greenhouse. The wind billowing out the seat of my breeches. My feet crackling splinters of glass and dried putty. The half-grown chrysanthemums staring up like accusers. Up through the streaked glass, flashing with sunlight. A few white clouds all rushing eastward. A line of elms plunging and tossing like horses. And everyone pointing up and shouting. Now let's reflect about the poem with a few questions. Number 1, what are some examples of sensory details? What senses do they engage? Number 2, this poem is told through the point of view of a child. What emotions is the child feeling? What parts of the poem suggest these feelings? Number 3, what simile is used in the poem? Number 4, how does this poem reflect realism? Here are some possible explanations to the questions. Number 1, what are some examples of sensory details? What senses do they engage? Wind billowing out the seat of my breeches engages the sense of touch. My feet crackling splinters of glass and dried putty engages sound. And the streaked glass flashing with sunlight engages the sense of sight. Number 2, this poem is told through the point of view of a child. What emotions is the child feeling? What parts of the poem suggest these feelings? Take a moment to read the explanations below. The emotions could be excitement and adventure, fear and tension, and joy and recognition. Number 3, what simile is used in the poem? A line of elms plunging and tossing like horses. The movement of the trees in the wind is being compared to the movement of rearing horses. Number 4, how does this poem reflect realism? The combination of detailed sensory imagery, an everyday or mundane setting, and genuine human emotion helps the poem reflect realism effectively. Take a moment to read the explanations below.
Now let's make some personal connections.
Talk with a partner. Number 1, what part of the poem stood out to you the most? Number 2, think about a time when you did something adventurous or daring as a child. How did you feel in that moment? Did you experience any feelings like the child's emotion in the poem? Number 3, the poem uses vivid imagery of wind, clouds, and trees. How does nature influence your emotions and actions? Do you have any memorable experiences in nature that bring up strong feelings?